Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining today's ONAP National Best Practice webinar. This conference is being recorded. The slides will be available on the HUD Code Talk website, and the recording will be available there in about a week. Please note that all participant lines will be muted until the Q&A portion of the call. At that time, we will provide you with instructions on how to ask a verbal question. You are, of course, welcome to submit written questions throughout the presentation, and these will be addressed during Q&A. To submit your question in writing, use the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen, select all panelists from the Send To drop-down menu, and submit your question. Should you require technical assistance, send a note to the event producer or call our help desk at 1-888-796-6118. With that, I'd like to turn things over to Heidi Frechette, Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Native American Programs. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Post-so, everyone. I want to say well and thank you so much for joining us here today. As she said, I'm Heidi Frechette, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Native American Programs. I'm very excited to host this second webinar in our series on best practices on Indian housing. It's been very inspiring for me to see through my tenure as DAS, to see all the wonderful things that you all are doing in your tribal communities with the assistance of HUD programs and HUD area office staff. We wanted to take an opportunity through these webinar series to really share and highlight some of the amazing work that's being done by folks in Indian country, and also provide you with an overview of some of the tools and resources available for you all as you look to meet the needs of your people. Today, we will be hearing about the San Felipe Pueblo Housing Authority's Black Mesa View subdivision, the first ever new construction subdivision on the Pueblo of San Felipe. It has created homeownership assets for 150 families, which is 800 tribal members, and has brought many back home to live, as well as creating a skilled workforce of 40-plus people to construct, design, and build these homes through a force account crew. This project was financed primarily using HUD's ARA funding, the Title VI Loan Guarantee Program, and the Section 184 Loan Guarantee Program. So it highlights all of the programs that we've seen a lot of tribes use to be innovative in creating new home ownership units. I'm so honored today to introduce our featured guest, Mr. Isaac Perez, who's Executive Director of the San Felipe Pueblo Housing Authority. Isaac has served as the Executive Director for over 16 years and has overseen the development of over 200 new units and the rehabilitation of over 200 tribal homes, expending over $50 million in federal, state, and tribal funds. Under his leadership, the Housing Authority has received numerous awards for their outstanding achievements in expanding housing to their tribal members. And I have to say I've had the pleasure of going and seeing the good work that Isaac and his staff, with the support of the tribal government, have done in the community. And it's amazing and also inspiring. Additionally, Secretary Carson has had the honor of going out and meeting with tribal leaders and looking at this great work as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Isaac to discuss the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deputy Assistant Secretary, and good morning or good afternoon to all of you out there in the Indian housing world. On behalf of the Pueblo San Felipe Tribal Council, Tribal Administration, San Felipe Housing Authority Board of Commissioners, I am honored and very happy and excited to be here today as we are selected for a ONAP Best Practice program, and feel very fortunate and so very excited to be here today. And wanted to first start off by thanking all our partners throughout the country with HUD, which goes from the Washington office, Title VI Office of Loan Guarantee, to the Denver office with 184s, to our Phoenix office and our Albuquerque local office, and a lot of names there that I'll probably get into through my presentation, but HUD has been very instrumental in helping us get to where we need to with what I'm about to present today. So with that, I will start our presentation. And Apparently, any questions that are sent in through the presentation will be answered as the presentation is concluded, just in case you're wondering. Okay, so if we could start with the first slide. We are San Felipe Pueblo Reservation. We are located, if any of you are familiar, in New Mexico, right in the middle of Albuquerque up to Santa Fe. We're right in the heart of central New Mexico, and San Felipe Pueblo is one of the most traditional tribes in the area, and we are about, I'd say, 25 minutes north of Albuquerque and about 25 minutes south of Santa Fe. For any of you that are in the area, we're right along the banks of the beautiful Rio Grande River, which rolls right through the center and heart of the traditional pueblo of the reservation. Next slide, please. As of last year, our tribal enrollment is approximately 3,750 enrolled tribal members. We have a low-income household percentage of right around 70%. Our housing units total on the reservation up a little over 700 units, which used to be 500 units a few short years ago, but with the development of our subdivision and some other scattered housing that we have built, we are now over 700. Units mostly are slab-on-grade wood frame, although we do have a small percentage of some of the older traditional adobe units that families have modified through the years, or that we may have helped assist and renovate through ICDBG or HUD home funds through the years. But for the most part, I'd say about 80% of the units here at San Felipe are traditional wood frame. The picture you see on this slide is actually one of our first projects that was done in our subdivision, and that unit there is about 2 years old and was one of the units done with Title VI funds that converted into Section 184, into a Section 184 loan. That unit is 1,800 square feet and is a 4-bedroom unit. When I got here 16 years ago, one of the first things that I asked the tribal leadership was, if they wanted a subdivision or if they wanted scattered housing, because so many of the tribes are different in what they want. And the directive that I got back then, which was 2002, seems like yesterday, but it was in 2002, I was directed in my long-term goal, to go out and build a subdivision that was located away from the traditional pueblo, which is right along the Rio Grande River in between a mesa and I-25 freeway. And so we started out that way and started looking for funding for a subdivision. Next slide, please. Little history of the Housing Authority here. Got on board in 2002, and during my interview with my Board of Commissioners, which is still my current Board of Commissioners, by the way, was not told that there was only one other staff member on board. So when I came on board, there was myself and one other staff member who was basically the personnel person, finance person, program person, administrative assistant, and everything else you can think of, and is still here with me today. Her name is Brenda Rico, and she is my finance manager. By 2003, we had not secured, but located and identified pretty much close to $4 million that had been sitting in IHBG locks pretty much since Nahazda had come out in the late 90s. And unfortunately for the Pueblo, and for tribal members, there hadn't been much housing done, but fortunately for me, coming in as a new director, there was 5 years worth of funding in locks sitting around that allowed me to hit the ground running and help facilitate me to plan and coordinate, and I really didn't have to worry about securing a lot of money to start the initial homes. And I want to be clear that on the slideshow it says that we built 13 units and rehabbed 22. None of those units were involved in the subdivision because we were still in the preliminary stages of planning at that time for our Black Mesa subdivision. 2004, 2005, we were very fortunate to receive the first ever San Felipe Pueblo ICDBG Awards, which we used to renovate up to 50 units. We were, at that time, if many of you will remember, some of you, like we did, had to apply under the Pueblo for our ICDBG grants and be a sub-recipient, and we were able to do that in 2004 and 2005. And as we were doing that, we figured out a little process because we were spending so much money on our renovations because they were so old and dilapidated that I met with our area office grants management specialist named Leticia Rodriguez, who has been instrumental in helping us not just with the subdivision, but for every housing program we offer here at the Housing Authority. And we discussed establishing a HUD-approved workforce account, 100% made up of tribal members from the Pueblo, and started going over the criteria and the thresholds of what the requirements were for that. And shortly, by the end of 2005, we actually had our own HUD-approved force account. And at that time, I believe we only had 8 tribal members that we had working, and I'm proud to say today that we have over 50 Pueblo San Felipe tribal members all working on our force account that work on our homes, and some of them actually reside in the units. And so that started our force account. That was in 2004, 2005. As we were renovating units and building sporadically scattered units with IHBG funds mostly, we formally got a 100-acre parcel of land donated to us by the tribal traditional leaders and the tribal council that was located, I'd say, about 1.5 miles from the heart or the traditional area, the reservation. And as soon as we got the land donated via tribal council resolution, we actually went through a master lease process with the local Department of Interior, BIA, Southern Pueblos Agency located in Albuquerque to master lease and subdivide the entire 100 acres and conduct environmental assessments, geotechnical soil investigations, and do all our preliminary work ahead of time so that we wouldn't get stuck in having to do it each time we had to build a house within the subdivision. And that was a big part of the planning going back then. From 2007 to 2009 was a lot of this master lease planning, and it was something that was new to the area here at the Albuquerque office. And we had to have several meetings, not only with BIA and HUD staff, but also with BIA solicitors/attorneys and our attorneys to make sure that we're all on the same page as far as what we could accomplish by establishing and putting a master lease in place, because there's things such as service line agreements, right-of-ways, infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, storm drainage, flood control, just a whole number of things. And what we did was we had several meetings with BIA to make sure that we wouldn't get surprised at any time, so we wouldn't run into any delays as far as getting the master lease and we went forward with our process. And what we did was, going back to 2008, 2009, what our plan was for the subdivision was to actually master lease the whole 100 acres and to partition out phases and sections. And so as we would build, say, 40 units, we would simply go to BIA and say, we've got funding, we're going to build 40 units, and we're partitioning those 40 units out of the master lease now into individual leases, which BIA already had on file, which already had a lease, a legal description, and a title status report, which was very instrumental for those of you that know that those sort of things are required when you're converting into Section 184 loans. And they all have to be done individually. We tried to kind of do a big lump and include them all in one. However, we were not able to do that. And so that all went back into the planning process. So as we were getting close to finalizing the planning process for the subdivision, we were very fortunate that in 2009, President Obama, the administration announced that they were going to be releasing ARA funding at the time under the Native American Housing Block Grant, I believe. And we applied for one. It was a competitive process for those of you that do remember. And within a very short time, we were awarded $2 million, which we used to start for the infrastructure of the project. And was not just infrastructure, but also engineering, architecture, planning, that sort of stuff. Next slide, please. Picture that you see there is of a couple of my very happy staff, and Ms. Brenda Rico, who I spoke of, is on the left, and on the right is Ms. Pamela Sandoval, who is our programs manager assistant. And one of the goals that I had when I got here to the Housing Authority, which we call SEFA, by the way, San Felipe Pueblo Housing Authority, was to establish a one-stop housing program because there seems to be a disconnect on a lot of tribes that have separate housing programs within their own programs, such as HUD programs, BIA HIP programs, a loan office, CDFIs, that sort of thing. And what I wanted to do to help with the confusion of that was establish a housing authority that could provide assistance to tribal members regardless of their income or where they were living. And I'm proud to say that 16 years later right now we have that. And over on the right of this screen is a small list of some of the things that we're able to provide here, such as home improvements, renovation projects, ADA handicap accessibility, new construction, of course. We still do, for what it's worth, try to get housing improvement program funds, HIP funds through the BIA, which are very scarce at the moment. My staff provides homeowner counseling, home buyer counseling. That is provided through 2 certified pathways homeowner counselors that we have on staff. We provide mortgage loan processing. We have our own apprenticeship program that was developed internally through the Housing Authority as part of our force account for some youth and young adults. And we also offer construction management services through an MOU/MOA to the tribe now to provide oversight on construction projects that are not HUD affiliated. And to branch out on that a little bit, we also are providing construction management services to 4 tribes right now that are in the area that we have working with our force account. So we're very proud of that. Next slide, please. Challenges. One of the major challenges that we had starting off here was that San Felipe Pueblo had not had any major new construction on the reservation since 1972. The Pueblo did not have certain things in place through the years, and didn't have the capacity, and unfortunately missed the second or third wave of so-called HUD housing in the 90s. And so when I got here in 2002, it had actually been 30 years since there had been any new construction. And that was one of the reasons that our housing waiting list was very high at the time. It was up over 300. Got here, it is still right now over 150. But when you walk into a situation where there hasn't been any new housing in 30 years, it creates quite a dilemma. Other challenge was because the Housing Authority had not done any other seeking of housing funding at the time. They were only being supplied with their IHB formula, which at that time was about $550,000 to $580,000 a year, because we do not have any 37 Act FCAS units here, so we are all getting need basis only. And so $550,000 a year when there hasn't been new construction on a reservation in 30 years is not a lot of money. We had a ton of overcrowding, specifically in our traditional village area. Examples could include 2-bedroom units that are maybe 900 square feet with up to 10 individuals living in them with one bathroom. We had a very limited housing, if you want to even call it a market, I guess, because there really was none here. There were no rentals, there was no multifamily, and families, specifically younger families, that had gone through high school, were going to college, and things like that, were not able to return home and live in any new housing because there simply was none at that time. A lot of the houses, and you'll see this in a lot of the statistics that were done, were in substandard condition. Although we are in the desert, we do have a lot of mold due to moisture conditions. We are, as I mentioned earlier, right next to the Rio Grande River, and we have very close in proximity to that river, so we do have mold issues. And one of the biggest challenges was just the limited housing staff at the time. For, I'd say, 8 to 12 months here, it was myself and Miss Brenda Rico, and we knew we had to turn that around and get help here as soon as we could. Next slide. Back to what I was talking about earlier, I've been very fortunate in my time here at 16 years with San Felipe Pueblo. Very fortunate because I am a non-native and was new to the area, and to be honest, had never worked with tribal housing. I had worked in public housing for the beginning part of my career, but I had never worked with tribes. And when I got here, once I was able to establish some trust with the tribal leadership, the tribal council, I was able to get them to trust me and donate the 100-acre parcel of land, which was not an easy thing to do. It's a lot of land, and the tribal council and traditional leaders had never done that here. So, but the opportunity was there. I couldn't say that there was no land, we couldn't build anywhere. I had $4 million of unspent money in locks, which was sitting in our account, and the 2009 ARA funding, which we were fortunate to receive. I think we received in 2010. We started working on securing an architect engineering firm, which was at the time one of the largest Alaskan Native companies, WH Pacific. for those of you that don't know them, has been very helpful with our project, not only just with helping us design some of the units, but also putting together the civil drawings, storm drainage, flood mitigation, those sort of things. And it's been a very lengthy, complicated process because we built it in phases, but they've been with us and they've stuck with us through their contract, I believe, now for 6 years. Other opportunity, again, another very fortunate situation for us. I'd say probably within 200 yards of where the subdivision is, and you can see it in that right picture there. There's a building with a green roof with a light green plaster color on it. That's actually not a house. That's actually a very nearby state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant that the Pueblo put in themselves about a year before we broke ground on the project for the subdivision. And the wastewater system runs right through the subdivision and was engineered and designed right in line with the subdivision. And so we're very fortunate there. We really lucked out with that one. The tribe had already selected that area to build the wastewater treatment plant, and the 100-acre land that we got donated just happened to be pretty close to it. And without a few minor modifications, we were able to incorporate it right through the subdivision, and it is fully equipped now with a reuse line with gray water that we can use to tap into watering and assisting with things in the subdivision like parks, baseball, softball fields, and that sort of thing. Picture on the left is the first street that we started working at the subdivision, and that picture is actually 9 years old. And those units are anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 square foot, depending on bedroom size. And if I can back up a little bit, due to the fact that we are in this state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant, not have any of the homes in the subdivision that are on a septic tank. And they are all on the community line. And this project, the subdivision, has opened so many other doors and created more opportunities than just the subdivision. About 2 years after we broke ground and started building at the subdivision, the Pueblo, the tribal leadership saw what a benefit it was to be on the community line and not have so many septic tanks throughout the area, and actually out of their own tribal funding paid for a wastewater project that basically wiped out septic tanks throughout and connected every unit on the reservation, if it was possible, to the wastewater treatment line. And I probably say that would probably not have happened within that area with the planning of building the subdivision and attaching those homes first and seeing the benefits that it created for the families. So it hasn't just created housing opportunities. The subdivision has opened so many other doors. Next slide, please. Talked a little bit about this earlier, but going back to 2007, and I really want to reiterate and emphasize the planning part of this project and getting people involved early. And although everything looks nice and neat and almost done right now, it took at least 4 to 5 years of no construction, just basically meetings, sitting down, planning. And as you can see there, we started doing that in 2006, 2007. We didn't break ground here, I believe, till pretty close to 2011, I believe. But going back to what I was talking about earlier, we created a master lease, which was the first one in this area. It created 150 single-family lots within 100 acres of land, which is the land that the tribe donated. We began to screen potential homeowners from the waiting list, which my staff, which at this time had now went up to a whopping 5 people, I believe, and make sure that they were eligible, that their incomes were fine, and that they were all qualified tribal members from San Felipe. Very important here, we started to coordinate and get the local ONAP offices involved and basically bring them in to help our board, help the staff understand what Nahasda really was. We called it Nahasda 101 at that time, so that the housing board could understand that, there's so much else you can do with Nahasda. It's not just, get your $400,000 or $500,000 a year, sit on it and build a house or 2 houses a year, because you're not going to accomplish much with that. And I'll have to give my board a lot of credit for allowing me the flexibility and to be creative with Nahasda, to use it as a leveraging tool to go out and get other funding opportunities and not just sit on it, use all the Nahasda money, and not be able to do anything for certain stretches of the year. We conducted, as I mentioned earlier, just one big environmental review, which was very interesting because not only did we do a complete NEPA review for HUD, but BIA also required their own environmental NEPA clearance through their office. And so at any given time, we had one environmental review, but as of today, we've had 6 different environmental reviews on the same parcel of land, pretty much all giving the same information. But we've done that, and about 3 years ago, we started working closely with Andrea Dunyan out of the Phoenix office with HUD, who's been very helpful with helping to update our environmental assessments, and we do that because we're still at the subdivision and we're still doing things, and certain things do require NEPA reviews, so we do get it updated every couple of years because there are changes that happen with the environment up there. Started meeting with all the local utility companies. The Pueblo does have its own utility company here. The tribal utility company here at the Pueblo at that time was receiving BIA DOT roads infrastructure funds at the time, and since then has now converted over to FHWA funds, which is Federal Highway Administration funds, and those funds have been used to build the entire road system, curb and sidewalk throughout the subdivision. And I've been the public improvement. The slide, the picture in the slide there is our subdivision. The little chart, which is right to the left of it, is something that my programs manager, Danielle Tenorio, has come up with to help me figure out how many different funding sources we've used. And each one of those lots is identified with a little dot sticker on there to show the different funding sources that we've used here. So although there has been some ICDBG and minimal HIP funds, there's also been, if some of you remember, the Rural Innovation Fund program that came out a few years ago, which I believe was a cast off of the old RHED program. We were fortunate enough to get, I believe it was $1.6 million of funding for that, and we built new homes within the subdivision with that. New slide, please. So, going back a little bit and talking about financing and different funding sources, things like that. When we did meet with the tribal council in the mid-2000s and 2006, 2007, one of the tasks was, we have all this that we're sitting on, so build these scattered units and renovate, and we were getting ICDBG. But the task that I was put on was to look at the different financing packages out there. And there are a bunch of different ones, and everybody's different, and some work better for others. But at the end of the day, for us here at San Felipe, what we felt the most compelling and flexible and what was most advantageous for us was to go after Title VI financing. And Title VI in our area was kind of this ghost program, if you want to call it that hadn't been used in years. And after meeting with Leticia Rodriguez at our local HUD office and consulting with some people in Phoenix at the ONAP office, and really understanding what Title VI was, because at the time I think there was some confusion over Title VI, and if you were to access it, would you lose your NAHASDA funding on an annual basis and that sort of thing. In fact, I know I had been to several trainings for other tribes where housing authority directors and tribal staff thought that if they were to access Title VI funding, which is a five-year loan times your annual NAHASDA amount need, that you would lose your NAHASDA funding every year, so you wouldn't get any money, which is not the case. It's basically a five-year guaranteed loan, 5 times your need component of NAHASDA, but you still receive your NAHASDA money. So for me, it just seemed like a no-brainer if we could get approved and go through the process for Title VI to go utilize the Title VI program. And at that time, we just figured we would secure a Title VI loan and we would build units with it. And they would remain in Title VI loans, I think, for 20 years at the time. And that was our original option. And what we did was back in 2010, we applied and we got our first Title VI loan through Office of Loan Guarantee, through Mr. Bob Lamp, who unfortunately is no longer around to help us with more Title VI funding, and Thomas Wright, who at the time was, I believe, the Director of Office Loan Guarantee. And we were able to secure $2.8 million in a Title VI loan through Bank of America. And we were able to negotiate an interest-only period for the first 2 years of the loan. And we built 40 units, we built 12 stick-built units, and we built 28 modulars. And in the slides that you see on this slide, those are actually modular units. They're all stick-built, they're all 2x6 framed, they're not your old standard mobile modular units that were built with 2x4s. They're all built with 2x6 framing and are all on permanent foundations. The reason the modulars were built was kind of an accident. We had partnered with a not-for-profit agency called Native American Lending Group here back, I believe, in 2007, 2008, to apply for an ICDBG grant for a mobile home or modular park area on the reservation. And we applied with them. To be honest, I didn't think they would get the grant. They actually got the grant, and $500,000 of that was our part to contribute and build foundations and help build modular or mobile homes. So rather than give the funding back, although we had the land donated and everything for the subdivision, my board and the tribal council said, well, let's use some of that money, build all the foundations, and build 2x6 modular units on the reservation. And so we did, and it was the first project of its type in the area. And we were actually able to get a contractor to come out, build the modular units on the reservation. They established a building yard very close in proximity to the subdivision, hired, I believe, over 60 tribal members, some of them being members of our tribal force account, and literally built the units in close proximity and moved them over to the subdivision and popped them on foundations. And so it was more than just building 28 modulars and shipping them down the road a state over. They were actually built in pretty close proximity but transported right here, and were actually framed and built by our tribal members. So we were pretty proud of that, and that gave us a really good picture of what we could accomplish with our own workforce account. And probably have to say that that was the real eye-opener for my project manager, his name is Randy Tenorio, to say, do you know what, we can do this ourselves, and we can save a lot of money doing it using our tribal workforce. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, when we first looked at Title VI, we went into it a little, I don't want to say blind, but I guess not looking at all the angles of it. And so we got our big $2.8 million Title VI loan, and we actually built 28 units, put families in mortgages for those units, and then again met with our local HUD office, Ms. Rodriguez, and our attorney, who's Tim Humphrey, through Stetson Law Office, and came up with an idea that was a little different at the time for this area. And we thought, well, you know, why don't there's no limit on how many times you can apply for Title VI, and why don't we start paying off the Title VI and secure individual Section 184 mortgage loans and go right back and apply for another Title VI. And so starting with, I believe it was our second phase at the subdivision, we basically would secure Title VI funding, and then we would go back and individually convert every loan in the Housing Authority's name into Section 184 mortgage loans. And it's more than just freeing up the Title VI money why we did this. The Title VI loan is a 20-year term, and the interest is a little higher because it's more of a commercial loan. Section 184 has a lower interest rate, and it's up to a 30-year term. And so when we started converting those, and we planned to convert them, it lowered everybody's payments, which of course everybody liked here. And so at the end of the day, what we had was, instead of having one big Title VI loan, we had 28 individual Section 184 mortgage loans. And one of the key things that allowed us to do that, as I mentioned earlier, was getting that master lease early through BIA and getting each lot its own lease and legal description and title status report. And that made it, I won't say easy, but that really helped to transition and convert the Title VI loans into individual 184 mortgage loans, because all of the so-called record legal paperwork was already on file with BIA, and it was just a matter of getting BIA to forward that to our lender at the time. So we used the 184 money and paid off the Title VI loan. We created individual mortgage agreements between the Housing Authority, because the loans are in our name, and the families. As soon as we did that on our first loan, we then went right back, met with Bob Lamp and Tom Wright in D.C., and repeated the process again and got another Title VI loan. And to this date, we've done it 3 more times, and we've kept repeating it. As of right now, we are in the middle, hopefully, of securing our 4th Title VI loan, which we hope to get very early next year. And although Bob Lamp is not around with the Title VI program anywhere, we are working with the person whose name is Jake. Next slide, please. The unit in the slide there was one of our very first units that was built, and that is a modular unit. I think that's a 3-bedroom unit. The payment on that unit, you see in your picture, is $175 a month, and that includes full coverage insurance through Amarin Risk Management. Next slide. Before we put families in units, because there had been such a shortage here of housing and basically just education for families not just purchasing, but credit counseling, financial literacy, budgeting, that sort of thing. As I mentioned earlier, I do have 2 certified Pathways Homeownership counselors on board, and our waiting list at that time was about 5 years. And it took about 5 years of one-on-one work, meeting with families to prepare them for home ownership and making sure their incomes were correct and that they understood what they were getting themselves into, because the majority of our families had never had long-term debt, specifically a house or mortgage. As typical, we required annual recertifications while they remained on the waiting list. Once they are formally approved, every family that we assist that's going in through home ownership is required to go to a mandatory home ownership training, which we hold here at our Tribal Head Start Auditorium. And it's not all just about housing and payments at that mandatory training. It's also involving maintenance staff, Ameren Risk Management, who's the insurance company. We do have people from social services there, and it's a team effort to let the family know that these are things that you're going to be expecting when you get into your new home, and these are certain situations that may come up. And I'm proud to say we've had 5 different home ownership seminars, and we've had 100% attendance. And so, which is good, because families they are required to attend. Once families are, I guess what we would call pre-approved and have attended their home ownership session, they meet internally, and I want to make sure that's a big part of what I talk about here also. I mentioned, I think on the first or second slide, that we wanted to provide a one-stop shop housing authority for families. And one of the things that we're able to do here is I have a tribal member, his name is Brennan Valencia, who has an associate's degree in drafting, and design and draw up all of our own units that we work on. And so families are able to come into our office, sit in a room, sit with Brennan, and we use Chief Architect software, which for those of you that don't know is just a little scaled down version of AutoCAD. And families are able to sit in his office. They're able to see their home put up on a screen and a wall, and select their colors for carpet and paint and countertops and cabinets way in advance of when they receive their unit. And we found that that's been a really effective tool for families, because the families feel like they design their units and they take pride in them more. And that has been a real big key for us here, because for years, going back to the 60s and 70s, homes were built on reservations and basically just said, boom, here's your 3-bedroom unit, take it or leave it, and this one. And they weren't really involved in those selections. Our families, whether they're applying for an AHAZDA, Title VI, 184 loan, or whatever program, they're actually able to sit and contribute to the design of their home, as long as we stay within the state building codes. And I will tell you, we've had some pretty interesting requests, but as long as we stay within our budget that's been established, and we're within the applicable building codes and meet compliance with things, they're able to design their own home, so they feel like they're an architect, and they like that. Requirements that we have: they must have at least 1 year of sustainable employment before they're even pre-approved. As soon as they moved in, or actually a little bit before they move in, we sign mortgage documents with the homeowner. And I want to go back a little bit on that, because being that we are taking out the 184 loans, we have a loan with the bank, and our 184 bank is Bank of Albuquerque / Bank of Oklahoma, and we have a loan in our name with them for the 184s. However, we have an internal mortgage document, a tribal mortgage document between us and the family. So basically what happens is the families make the payments to us, we make them to the bank, and the challenge with that is always trying to get the payments to be apples to apples. And in this day and time of interest rates and increasing a little bit, that's been a bit of a challenge for us most recently, but we've found ways around that. Resolutions for leases are all completed because they're done way ahead in advance, and basically when we get our leases approved at BIA, to be honest, they don't even have a name on them. They're just under the housing authority's names, and when we convert them from Title VI to 184 loans, the homeowner's name then goes transferred on to them at that time, and they're sent into BIA for recording. Slide. Okay, post-purchase counseling. As we sit right now, we're taking payments for 130 families within the subdivision. I mentioned 150 earlier because at the time that we were putting the slide together and that Amy and Iris were here, we had not finished the last 20, and I'm proud to say that just as of last week, we now have 150. Families come into the housing authority, they make their payments. We're like virtually a small mortgage company. We take cash, checks, credit cards, and have now been approved to accept direct deposit, which has been a major tool for us to accept payments. Payments are tracked monthly. I will emphasize on this as we go down the slide that the tribal courts works with us, and we're in very close partnership with them. I'll give the tribal leadership, credit for this, and we never want to really talk about too much of this, but it's reality. We have had in the 150 units that are complete up there, we have had 3 defaults and evictions, and I'm very proud to say that the tribal administrations and the tribal court here have allowed us to use our policies and enforce those policies with the families. Without that, it'd be very tough. And I hate to say it, but after our first eviction, which I believe was 5 years ago, since that time, our payments, although they're not all on time or ahead every month, our payments our families are on a very regular schedule, and we have not had more than 3 evictions here in 7 years. And if you do the percentages on that, that's very well. But to me, that shouldn't surprise a lot of people, as the percentage of evictions on tribal lands is low anyway. But we have proof of that here because our families pay. And, all the payments are not as low as that house that I showed you earlier that are 175. Our highest payment here right now is a 5-bedroom home, which is about a little under 2,000 square feet, and homeowners pay under $700 a month, and that includes full coverage insurance through Amerind. We're not in the business here of putting families in and evicting them. We're in the business of putting them in their homes and letting them succeed. And, I made the comment a little while ago that, our families pay, but there are always issues that come up. So our families, we work with them very closely. We send out letters, we get out into the community, and we don't let them disappear from us. If a family is late a month, we don't enforce and evict them immediately. We work with them to get them caught up through a payback agreement plan that we have put in place here. And we have also budgeted money under our NAHASDA budget every year for Section 184 payment assistance. And in the event that, we have a couple of families that get into trouble because things happen, we are able to help them catch up with their payments through NAHASDA as long as they're low income, and they simply pay that back to us via a payback plan that we put in place for them. But our highest payment right now is under $700, and we kind of know the area, we kind of know the income, and we kind of know where we have to be to make this program work a reality for families here and still have them live comfortably. Next slide, please. The picture you see there is of Mr. Brennan Valencia, who's the individual I mentioned earlier, tribal member from San Felipe. Brennan's been employed here, I think, 9 years, and he is our basic in-house draft architect. Sits there in his office. You can't see it on that picture, but that's just his computer screen, but he has a projector where he's able to pop up the floor plan and some elevations and pictures for families so that they see their house even before they're in it. And almost like a virtual tour, I guess, if you want to call it that. And Brennan designs low maintenance, energy efficient homes for families, and I really mean low maintenance because, we want to make it as maintenance friendly for our families as we can, because they are required to provide their own routine maintenance in their home. But I want to go back and hit up on the involving the families in the design of their homes. Taking pride in ownership of their homes, they feel like their homes. It's true home ownership. They're not just given a house and saying, you're going to live in this house, like it or not. They're actually involved from the day we break ground to the day they move in and have input, as I said, within reason. We've had some pretty funny requests here through the years, but we've always been able to stay within the applicable building codes for the state of New Mexico. Next slide, please. Going back on that note, homeowners actually get to choose what style of house that they want. And the three pictures you see here are three different designs. The one up on the right is your more traditional flat roof, which is what I like, which have higher ceilings, and it's more of your traditional Pueblo or Southwestern look. What we've been getting more of through the years is families that request pitched roofs, and of course we put metal pro panel roofs on. And although the look is a little more modern and everything else, families unfortunately have just gotten tired of living in their old HUD or tribally built flat roof units where the flat roofs leaked for years upon years. And although the new flat roof systems have improved immensely and do have a pitch on them, and that flat roof picture you see on the right, you can't see it there because the parapet walls are built up. But there is a flat roof system. It does have a pitch on it and drains right into a full gutter system. And we have not had many issues with our flat roofs that we've built here within the last 6-7 years. However, the majority of families, in fact, out of the 150 units at the subdivision, there may be 10 flat roofs. Families are just tired of the flat roof look. Although I recommend for them to get flat roofs because I personally like them, but it's their house, so they get to select it, and they can select the roof color and the actual stucco color. Next slide, please. Other little things that they are involved with, they get to pick the color, the style of their windows. They are all vinyl windows, which is better for energy efficiency. They're offered white windows, almond windows, bronze windows. We've had families that have even, as you'll see on that picture up on the right top there, that come in and purchase their own windows through their own means, and we install them for them. We give them the options of sliders, are single hung or grid style in their windows, so they feel like it's their house. Next slide, please. All of the units, whether they are flat roof or pitch roof or metal roof or shingle roof, all are installed with a downspout system through the gutters for drainage purposes, because we kind of learned the hard way here of draining not far away enough from the house, which causes foundations to move and settle a little bit more than they should. So about 3-4 years ago, we started putting full gutter downspout systems onto each house. Next slide, please. These pictures are some of the, on the top right is an example of one of our bathrooms in one of the homes. I don't believe that's a master bathroom, but I think that's one of the hallway bathrooms. On the left is a sample of some of the flooring that we put in the units. The bottom picture there is some submittals that are given to the families when they come in and meet with Brennan, and they're able to pick their tiles, their carpet colors, their cabinet colors, their cabinet style. There is some ceramic tile that is installed in the homes, and if it's within their budget, they're allowed to place ceramic tile. What we're seeing a lot of that's really popular is what you see on the left picture there is that wood laminate. That particular picture there is kind of a grayish look, but we have the more natural wood as well. But as you can see, families get to pick everything that goes into their home. Next slide, please. Cabinet colors, cabinet styles. You'll see the difference in these two cabinets. Those are white cabinets, believe it or not. We have a homeowner that basically did nothing but pick white for her whole house, whether it was cabinets, countertops, very, very light tan carpet. The marble, the ceramic tile that she put in was all white. We call it the White House because it's the only house on the reservation like that. But I believe they can pick between a hickory color, a maple color, a cherry wood, a white, and we even have a dark black color of cabinet. Next slide, please. Force account crew right now, which I talked about earlier, we're up over 40 tribal members. When fully staffed, we are above 50. The picture on your left there is of Mr. Brennan Valencia, and the man on the right is Mr. Randy Tenorio, who has been with me here for, I believe, 15 and a half years and oversees all the construction, not just in our projects, but throughout the Pueblo, and is in charge of inspections, estimates, and doing a lot of utility coordination. The picture on the right is our force account foundation concrete crew, which is made up of 7 tribal members, and what you see them there is finishing off the sidewalks. I think that picture is about a year old, but it brings up an interesting point that although the funding for the roads, the curbs, and the sidewalks up at our subdivision was provided via the tribe through Federal Highway Administration, because we have our own approved force account, we were able to utilize those funds and have our force account actually do the work and labor to do the curbs and the sidewalks, although the roads were subcontracted out to a licensed asphalt road company. Next slide, please. Benefits of the force account reduces our construction costs on project anywhere, I'd say, between 15 to 25%, depending on the project. It has increased the local unemployment rate tremendously at San Felipe. We had a 66% unemployment rate here about 6 years ago. That has went down up in the neighborhood of 10 to 12% since our force account has come in. We are actually the second largest employer via the so-called tribal departments here at the reservation. So we went from a staff of 2 to pretty much close to 70 employees, which includes our force account employees. We are actually able, through the force account and through our means, to purchase material in bulk, whether it's sheetrock, insulation, studs, lumber, concrete, any of that stuff. We are able to get bulk pricing on that, and we put out an annual RFP for a supply contract to all the vendors in the area and also outside the area to have an annual supply contract for all of our material. We've used, I think, 4 different companies and have spent so much money and spent so much money at Home Depot that we were actually Home Depot's contractor of the year 3 years ago just because of how much money we spent there. Our guys take a lot of pride in their workmanship. Framing comes natural to a lot of the tribal members in the area, which was one of the reasons we were able to get our construction crew and grow it so fast. Before we had our force account here, every morning you'd see truckloads of individuals leaving to work in Santa Fe or Albuquerque with framing companies that would come here to pay them and take them to work on their projects. And so we're able to keep a lot of those tribal members here at home now to work on their own homes and their families and friends' homes. My staff has complete oversight of the subcontractors. The picture you saw, Randy and Brennan, they pretty much oversee all my construction activities for me. We sub out via the force account electrical, plumbing, and roofing to licensed companies. We do that for a few reasons. I'm sorry. Okay, sorry about that. So the force account has done so well here at San Felipe that we are now working at 4 other pueblos within the area and are negotiating with 2 others that are a little bit north of us. And hopefully by early next year we will have contracts and MOUs in place with them. But going back to the subcontracting out so that I can be clear with that, we're in the process of trying to establish a 100% owned force account, which would mean that we have our own electrical, plumbing, HVAC employees. We do not have that yet. We still do sub out via competitive bid our electrical, plumbing, and roofing things, and pretty much the trades that require a license for the state of New Mexico, we do sub out to licensed certified companies. And we have found that actually saves us costs as well, because typically those subcontractors are submitting bids to a general contractor who marks it up, takes their profit and overhead, and so you're paying a little more. We bypass that project and just sign direct subcontracts with the subs ourselves. Next slide. Two-story house you see there is a private 184 unit that was built a year and a half ago and is located within our subdivision. That home right there is 2,600 square feet. It has 5 bedrooms, and the loan payment is $654 a month with insurance. Next slide. I mentioned very early, it's already almost 12:15, but I did mention earlier the flexibility that my board allows me to use with NAHASDA. And our NAHASDA IHP that goes in every year, I think has between probably 10 and 12 activities that get put in for approval, not just your normal construction, rehab, admin, and that sort of thing. We try to get as creative as we can within NAHASDA and just use it as a tool to go out and get more money. NAHASDA, examples like using NAHASDA to leverage to go get money for ICDBG or through State Housing Agency HUD home funds here. And pretty much with our budgets and what we do, and I think that's on a slide to be talked about later, we could sit here every month, every year, get $500,000. Our annual audits here, everybody, are anywhere between $4 and $6 million a year. We just had our 2017 audit done not too long ago, and that's what it turned into. For the Title VI, one key factor is that we negotiated 2-year interest-only payment. Our Title VI bank, which I failed to mention earlier, is Bank of America, which is out of Dallas-Fort Worth, and would also like to thank them a ton, and was really one of the major issues that I'd like to talk about was securing a Title VI lender, which was not easy. We went through probably close to 2 years of trying to go out and find a Title VI lender when we got this project off the ground, and honestly due to probably the unfamiliarity of the Title VI program and it being a commercial loan and who knows what other reasons, we were not able to. We must have went through 3 or 4 different lenders before we got our first Title VI, and we hunted, we shopped around like crazy for lenders, and at the end of the day, all of our Title VI loans have been with Bank of America. And with those Title VI loans, what we try to do is get that 2-year interest-only period, build as many homes as we can, only pay interest on what we're taking out to build the construction loans, and by the time the principal and the interest is due after the 2 years, hopefully those are paid off and under Section 184 mortgage loans, and we're able to just go back and apply for another Title VI. The money from Title VI, all of it is used 100% into the construction of the units. We utilize our IHBG to offset some of the costs to make the interest-only payments. My board feels that it's smarter to budget $120,000 annually to make interest-only payments for 20 to 40 units than to just build one house with $120,000 under IHBG. And I have to agree with them, and we've made that process work now 3 times, and as I said earlier, on our way to doing it a 4th time. All the houses within the subdivision, except for the modular units that were built by a licensed modular builder, were built via our force account crew. Families are all pre-qualified and then approved through the Housing Authority through a home ownership / home buyer program that is run here through our office. Switching gears to the 184s, as I mentioned earlier, we take out the loans under the Housing Authority's name, and after construction, we're able to then sign a mortgage agreement with the homeowner directly between us and them. So the homeowner pays us, we pay the bank. We then use the money to cash out the Section 184s. We then apply for another Title VI loan. At the end of the day, right now, we have, and this is a little confusing, but we only have right now currently, we'll end up with 40 184 loans, which is our last set of Title VI units, and I'll talk a little bit of why we don't have 150 of those loans for each project. Next slide. I mentioned earlier about finding a lender, and we planned, we coordinated, we met with our local area office, we met with Bob Lamp and Tom Wright in D.C. We thought we did all of everything preliminary that we could, and honestly, I thought the hard part of this whole process, obtaining Title VI, was going to be working through HUD and getting stuck in a long, delayed process, and I will tell you that I could not be more wrong with that. The HUD so-called part of the Title VI program it was not easy, but it was very smooth to go through with the HUD staff. After completing everything that's up front with a Title VI checklist that goes into Title VI in Washington, we were able to get a PLA letter, which is a preliminary letter of acceptance, within a couple of months. And we then thought we would go on to the easy part, which was finding a lender, and we're unpleasantly surprised that it literally took us over 18 months to find a lender. And we went through, I'm not going to name them, but we went through some of your bigger name banks throughout the country who would not offer Title VI, even though it is a highly percentage guaranteed loan. We were asked questions, and if some of you will remember, this is going back to the time period when the government had shut down and things like that. I forget what year that was. It's been so long. But one of the bigger lenders in the nation literally told us, we don't trust the government, and the government could shut down again, and then who's going to guarantee our loan? And we got posed with the question of, although that loan is I think it's 95% guaranteed, we want you to get a tribal council guarantee on top of the federal guarantee before we'll give you a Title VI. And so it was very challenging. Actually took quite a few calls to our congressional people from my office and tribal leadership here at the Pueblo to finally get us moving in the right direction. And with Tom Wright and Bob Lamp's help and Deanna Lucero, we were able to find a Title VI lender, which was Bank of America. So once we got through that and started talking about converting them, we started coordinating, having a lot of conference calls with Office of Loan Guarantee to discuss converting these over into 184s and going through appraisal processes, get each home paid off with an individual loan for each one, make sure that all the leases and TSRs are updated so that process would run smoother. And one of the challenges out there is that certain banks, certain lenders will do Title VI and they won't do 184s. And ideally, what you would really want is a one-stop shop bank that can provide both. Right now, where we're at, we're using Bank of America for our Title VI. We're using Bank of Albuquerque/Oklahoma for all of our 184 loans that we have between us and them. So ideally, if I had any recommendation, you might want to look for somebody that can provide both for you. It would make the process a lot more simpler. Next slide, please. Sources and uses chart. So at the end of the day, what we have up there right now and what we put in there all together, including the tribal land donation, and I want to talk a little bit about that because we did have a comparable market analysis done with that property, and it came in at $9 million through the Sandoval County, which is the county we live in. But we put in $2 million out of the ARA for infrastructure. We've used about $800,000 of IHBG funds. We have also included Indian Health Service to help with some of the water and sewer connections. The old RHED program is the modular funding that I talked about earlier. I think I lied. I said 500. It was actually 300. We did obtain a ICDBG grant. We received 2 of them that contributed to the subdivision. One was to build some new homes. Another was to provide mortgage principal buy-down for units within the subdivision, which was able to lower payment. We've used over $3 million of Federal Highway Administration money for the roads, curbs, and sidewalks. That money is under contract through the Pueblo. Direct construction money, we've used some MFA money, which is the Mortgage Finance Authority here in New Mexico. I mentioned the Rural Innovation Fund project, $1.6 million. We have taken out 3 Title VI loans, totaling $7.8 million. We paid those off, all with Section 184 loans, and so right now you're looking at right under $35 million that we have put project for the subdivision. Next slide, please. Reiterating the support and how fortunate I have been since I've been here as the director with my staff. We can only do what we do because the tribe supports us. And that doesn't just mean my board. That's actually tribal leadership, the tribal council, and the tribal administrations, which here at San Felipe Pueblo change on a yearly basis. So every year we have new tribal leadership, a governor, a lieutenant governor, a tribal war chief, and a lieutenant war chief, a fiscali, and a lieutenant fiscali. And in my 16 years here, I've got to say that I've received nothing but support for housing services and programs through them. So I want to reiterate that. The proof of that, they donated the land to us. They gave us 100 acres, which has been valued at $9 million, and that's a little bit, that's shortchanging ourselves a little. That $9 million was the value of the property when it was undeveloped. We're in the process now of getting new appraisals now that the property is fully developed, and I'm anticipating that number to skyrocket. More proof of the tribe's support and how we work together with the tribe. So we talked about all these loans, and I mentioned earlier that currently we only have our current Title VI to 184 conversions, and I want to say there's 20 to 40 of those loans. The reason there's not 150 of those since the time that we have built was 3 years ago I was inadvertently in a tribal investment committee meeting here for the Pueblo, and the tribe had several pretty large investments tied up through Office of Special Trust, some private investments, and I saw the rate of return on those significant investment amounts, and I couldn't believe how low they were. And as I sat there in the meeting, I made a couple of jokes to the Tribal Investment Committee, which was made up of a select group of 6 tribal councilmen here, saying, "Well, shoot, you know, we're sending more money off the reservation to these banks through our mortgages than you're getting with your investment accounts." And that comment went a long way. And within 8 months after that comment, I had been asked to present a program of tribal mortgage investment program to the tribal council here for approval, and I presented it. And 3 years ago, the San Felipe Pueblo Tribal Council paid off $10 million in Title VI and prior 184 loans, and are now receiving every penny of the interest payment every month for that. So families make their payments here. We pay the money to the tribe on a monthly basis. We keep a certain percentage for administration and operation. And within 4 months of starting that program 3 years ago, the tribe had made more money off of that interest coming back through the mortgage program than they had made in years with their Office of Special Trust investment. And to me, that's supporting and proving real self-determination with this whole program. It's not just a housing program. It's actually an investment that the Housing Authority and the tribe have made into the community, and now is recirculating back around the community through the force account, through the interest payments and the revenue that the tribe is making, pumping money back into the community to upgrade health and wellness facilities, libraries, recreation centers, and all those sort of things. And so all that is done because it has freed up that money. Through that process, we worked closely with DOT, as I mentioned earlier, which is DOT/Federal Highway Administration, to get funds for the roads and sidewalks. The tribe assists us here. They subsidize a big part of my salary and fund 2 full-time positions here. And again, one of the reasons the tribe's able to do that is because of the revenue that we generate off the interest payments that go to the tribal administration office. Again, using some of that money just as recently as the last 2 months, I got approval of over $300,000 to build 2 recreational parks within the subdivision, which will be started in the middle of January 2019. That funding is all coming out of interest money that has been going over to the tribe now for 3 years. So I can't state enough how fortunate we've been here and the support that the tribe has given us. And one other thing I did want to mention is that, you know, we've all been getting our IHBG funds later and later every year, and hopefully that changes. But the tribe here actually supports and advances funding to the Housing Authority up and until the time that the IHBG funds are here. So that helps a bunch as well. Next slide. The picture you see there, I don't know if, I think some of you are going to be able to, I believe this slideshow is available to everybody, but this is very new, and in the middle of this is, what you're looking at right there is a sports complex, which is the first of its kind here at San Felipe, and it will be in the center of our subdivision. The plan that's on an earlier slide, you'll see that in the center of the subdivision were some multi-family units and a town plaza park. That has been replaced for what you see on this slide here. And this sports complex includes a baseball field, a softball field, 2 basketball courts, 2 sand volleyball courts, a skating park, a larger concession area, and of course 2 pretty good-sized parking areas. And this will go right in the middle of the subdivision, which will be the first of its kind here at San Felipe. And everything you see there in green, although I think the architect went a little nuts with the trees, and will be fed by that reuse line coming off of the wastewater treatment plant. So the tribe will not have to be paying to pump in water to water everything you see there. In fact, it's already all installed in the ground through drip systems, irrigation systems, sprinkler systems, and that sort of stuff. Currently, for the future, as I said, we are in the middle of, I think we're kind of at the tail end now of applying for a new Title VI grant. We hope we will have the sports complex built by the end of fiscal year 2019. We will have 2 parts, which are the parts I talked about earlier that the tribe funded for us to put in. Hopefully those are ready to go for the kids before we get into spring and summer. And we are currently debating on whether or not to participate to try to be a tribal New Mexico Tribal Service Provider for the Weatherization Assistance Program through this Mortgage Finance Authority. So we got a lot going on here. Honestly, I didn't know if I would still actually be here when the subdivision was as close to complete as it is, but I'm very proud and honored that I am. And I never thought I'd have to say this, but we're actually needing more land, and we're needing another area to start developing. And I'm already working with the Tribal Council and Tribal War Chiefs who oversee the land here to do that. So we're not done. Our waiting list is still as funny as it sounds, and although we built as many homes as we have, as of right now, it's over 150 families. And what we've seen happen here is, although we're building homes and the tribe is growing, and tribal members that had left the reservation are coming back. They're coming home because there's homes here that they can apply for. We've had tribal members move back home within the last 3-4 years from California, Oklahoma, Connecticut, Arizona, all over the place. Just as recently as 2 weeks ago, we moved a tribal member back. I believe she had been in Oklahoma, and it was a very positive experience for her and my staff and the tribe, and the tribe was happy to have her come back home. Creating assets for the tribe. As I was just talking about, bring home tribal members that didn't have the opportunity to live in good quality housing. Employing tribal members. We're the second largest employment source here. We are a gaming tribe. The tribe does have the casino, but as far as tribal departments, and I want to be clear, we are a TDHE. We're not a tribal department, but as far as departments, we are the second largest on the Pueblo. Other assets, the huge return on investment on the interest paid on the 184 loans, and also creating land asset equity, which we had to educate our families on. A lot of the families did not realize how much, they don't understand equity. And they're just happy to be in their homes and don't understand that the day that they moved into those homes, they were walking into close to over $100,000 of equity on their home. Good switch of the slides there. So our homes are actually being built. This is a good example, 4-bedroom, $125,000. The appraised value, which I just got yesterday, updated, is over $195,000 value. $70,000 equity immediately within the house. So if you do the math, you go to the bottom there at 150 homes. With the equity, it's over $15 million in instant value for assets that we've created here. Little highlights. One of the things we were trying to do, and we're still trying to do even more, is have families kind of go forward and assume the loan on their own with their own means. And we have had 6 families do that have actually bought out the housing authority, went in, got their own 184 loan for different reasons. Some of them wanted to refinance, some of them wanted to refinance and make additions to their units or add on. For various reasons, things happen. Babies are born, people get married, so homes are always getting bigger here. But it's an immediate family stability, and it's a way for families to attain self-sufficiency and remain on the reservation. Big lessons learned. Find an experienced lender who will work with Title VI and 184 would be my recommendation. We spent a lot of time. I thought we're very thorough and covered a lot of things in our shopping and hunt for lenders, and I could tell you another story, but I will tell you that we lost out on about $500,000 because of our initial lender not coming through for us, and the IHBG amounts decreased the next year, which are tied to the amount of Title VI funding you got, and our amount went down 100,000. 100,000 times 5 is 500,000, and please make sure you work with somebody that understands Title VI and 184, because if you don't, you're going to get stuck in a lot of wasted time, and as I just explained, it could cost you a lot of money. Make sure you have a strong relationship with your tribal court program or system to help you uphold eviction and non-payments. I mentioned earlier that I'm very proud we've only had 3 evictions or defaults here. However, that doesn't mean I'm not in tribal court every so often with families that have gotten behind a couple of months and that we have to go to court. But when we do that, the courts are very strict to uphold the policies and the families pay. But without that communication, there's always seems to be a breakdown there. Changing dynamics in the traditional village. Didn't see a lot of it on this slide, but separate from our subdivision, which we've been talking about, we did do a big over $2 million project in the traditional heart area of the Pueblo's tradition area via 2 or 3 funding sources and renovated and gave our traditional plaza a complete new facelift within the village. And part of that money was that the tribe gave us as leverage for ICDBG for that came off of the revenue, the return of investment on some of the investment money. So the tribe really turns it back into their housing program, and now took it upon themselves to go back in and update and upgrade even traditional areas. And lastly, we've learned that home ownership does work. And for those of you that have been told it doesn't, you'll never get it to work, families won't pay, that sort of stuff, we're living proof that it does work. And with a lot of planning and a lot of coordination and patience and support from the tribe and tribal leadership, it will work. We've shown it here. If we've done it with a staff of 2, getting to a staff of 70, I think anybody can do it. Next slide. Other benefits at the subdivision. I mentioned earlier about overcrowding in not one house, but in several units, and I was not exaggerating. 10 to 12 family members living in a 900 square foot house. We have reduced the number of that significantly. Our homes are all built using the housing their standards of how many people should be living in a 5-bedroom house, depending on how many adults, how many children, the sex of the children, that sort of thing. The subdivision itself has now built its own community up there. We are in the middle of establishing resident organizations within the community. It brings people home. It's really emotional to work with families that thought they could never come home and live in a good quality home where they grew up and want to remain home. We've created a huge economic base here for families. We've created economic independence, self-sufficiency for the families that have worked here. It's really neat, creating tribal economy. The money is recycled. The tribal revenue that's generated from the families comes to the housing authority. It goes in to pay force account employees. It goes in to help helps us go to help with tribal loans. The tribe has generated that money and turned it around to pump in a good chunk of money into infrastructure and tribal utilities throughout the Pueblo. One example of that, again, utilizing the return of investment on the interest money is the subdivision in itself is the first area on the reservation here that brought in natural gas to the Pueblo. And when we did that at the subdivision, because of the benefit and the decrease those monthly payments, I guess, for natural gas, comparing it from $1 to almost $4 per gallon, the tribe used some of that revenue and actually did a tribal-wide propane to natural gas conversion project through their tribal utility department off of the money that we had generated with the payments. So it's created a lot more than just housing, as I said again.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Isaac. This is Heidi Frechette again. And I'm so impressed, and I'm sure others on the call are, about all the accomplishments that you and your staff, with the support of the tribal leaders, have made. And, you know, I think it's important to point out that you've created millions of dollars of economic assets for your families and staff and the community, from, you know, the donations of the land to the leveraging. And I found it particularly helpful to hear from you firsthand the detailed steps you had to take and the challenges you faced and how you were able to overcome them to produce such an amazing subdivision. And so thank you so much for sharing. Want to make a plug again for Title VI. You know, Isaac gave you a sense of how he navigated the process, first with working through the ONAP area offices and then coordinating. Krista Johnson is now the director of the Office of Living Guarantee. We're joined today by some of her staff, including Deanna Lucero, Yvonne Johnson, and Jake Corey. And Jake is the one that Isaac has mentioned previously he's been working with now. We were sad to see Bob Lamp go, but very happy that he could go on to the next phase and enjoy retirement, knowing he's done all this great work in Indian country. So on that note, Isaac, I want to ask you, you know, your housing seems to be 100% home ownership. So what tips do you have for other tribes that want to move to a home ownership model?
One of the biggest is planning. Start planning early with the home ownership program, and planning and including the families, qualifying them and educating them on what home ownership and home buyer, what it is. Because what we had a lot of, Heidi, was families that hadn't been in new homes and didn't know anything about a mortgage, didn't know what the difference with interest was to APR. They didn't know, and educating them on how they can become a homeowner and not just settle for a rental for 15 to 20 years. We had a lot of that, and working closely with your partners, with HUD, with counseling service providers, and getting your staff educated and certified to help with your families. One of the big tips that took me a while to catch on to here was Pueblo San Felipe is one of your more traditional tribes, and a majority of the families still speak the native language, which is Keres here. And we can send them to as many trainings and things as we want, but if that communication barrier is not there, it's huge. And my two homeownership counselors are fluent in Keres and English, and it really helps them helps families to understand what's being taught to them. I've sat with them and for half an hour at a time with families and discussed things. Tried to discuss things like budgeting and financing and interests and things like that. But that communication barrier there is huge there. And so I don't know the percentages of that language with most of the other tribes, but I know here at San Felipe that was a big one. And so education, communication, and planning. You know, as I said earlier, it's made to look easy now because we're almost done and winding this thing up, but this thing, Heidi, took over 10 years of planning to get where we are with it. And that would be probably my biggest tip: planning, communicating, and establishing your partnerships and working with, you know, not just your federal agencies like HUD and BIA, but tribal to tribal relationships. You know, we had to work with our utility company, our social service department, all those certain departments working within each other and establish what resources do you have within your tribe to help you get there, while you're still getting families ready for home ownership, and doing that at the same time and not get caught up in you know, it taking 25 years to try to get something going. And we're pretty proud of that. We you know, we made our mistakes along the way, which I didn't talk about, not coincidentally, but communicating, establishing those partnerships and relationships, and getting families ready for home ownership. Because
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just think it's important to point out, I think one of the major themes that you've had throughout your presentation is that these are people's homes, and you respect the community, you respect the culture, you respect language differences, you respect people wanting to be able to have choices in what goes into their home and how their home looks. And I think, as you said, that's really a big part of the success of this project, and it's really great to hear. And when you're thinking of construction and planning and all of that more, you know, technical, professional stuff, also remember these are people's homes and you're working within a community as well. It's very important.
And I did want to reemphasize, if possible, and if you have the resources, to look at your own in-house force account systems, because it's not only a way to create employment and jobs, but it saves a ton of money. We are able to save 20 to 25% in construction costs on each house, and that goes a long ways with the overall bottom dollar.
Yeah, and I understand that there are some non-tribal subdivisions nearby, and how have the appraised values of those homes impacted Black Mesa?
Significantly. We, as we started out with the project and started applying for funds, whether it was ICDBG or other funding sources, it's always a challenge on tribal trust land to establish values. And, you know, one of the old standbys is, well, let's run the BIA and see what they appraise things at. And we've kind of just thrown that, gone down a different path. And so we went out and did what is called a comparable market analysis. And again, just being very fortunate that not more than 0.3 or 4 miles down the road from our subdivision, there was a private custom subdivision that was just starting to be developed down the road. And so I went and met with the developer, saw the lots, got surveys of, or I didn't survey them, but I got copies of their surveys. I then met with the applicable county that we're in, because we're in the same county, which is Sandoval County, and by doing a comparable market analysis, was able to get not appraisal values, but values on the lots that we have per acreage, and compare it with what they were doing basically across the street. And that's where we came up with that $90,000 per acre. And at that time, Heidi, that $90,000 was undeveloped. And as of today, I do not have a developed value, which I know is significantly higher. And so we were able to use that subdivision a lot. It's helped us to go after other funding. We've used the land as in-kind donation from the tribe to bring in other funding sources, so it's helped a ton.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and I think one of the another encouraging thing that you've mentioned is that, you know, some of the challenges you faced with your first Title VI, that you've actually gone back and utilized the program for other phases as well.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to get into all our mistakes that we made. But,
we won't hold you accountable to those at this time.
but yes, when we got into Title VI back in, I guess that was 2010, I guess we kind of settled, Heidi. We were just happy that we had gotten Title VI, and it was $2.8 million, and we were going to build these homes and build some modular units, and didn't really look at the complete program and what you could do with it. And so the second go around we did, and we were able to come up with the process that we just went through and utilize it for so much more and turn it into not just a housing program, but an economic development program. And it's done just that. And, you know, if we can help anybody try to cut to that from the start, we will. And because we learned from it, we made a few mistakes and settled, but at the end of the day, again, and I'm not a salesperson for Title VI, but we did research, we did look, and at the end of the day, Title VI and 184 just simply had so much more benefits, and not just immediate with construction, but long-term. And one of the things I didn't want to do here was set the tribe up in another program that I won't mention, but set them up long-term to fail. And somebody not be here at the time and not understand the complexity of some of these other home ownership programs that are out there. Title VI, 184, it works, and I would highly recommend it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Isaac. And I think now we'll stop talking and hear from you all if you have any questions. Are there any questions?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as you move into Q&A, please feel free to place yourselves into the question queue by dialing #2 on your telephone keypad. You'll hear a notification when your line is unmuted, at which point please then state your name and question. You can still submit questions in writing by using the chat function on the lower right-hand side of your screen. Please remember to select all panelists from the Send To drop-down menu before submitting your question. All right, looks like we do have a couple of written questions. First question, would we be able to get these slides sent to us also?
Absolutely.
Yes, we will be posting them on Code Talk as well. You can email comments to us on Code Talk as well after this, and then we can coordinate to have them disseminated as well.
All right. Next question. Does New Mexico have building codes outside the national building codes? Did you have to apply for permits and inspections, or was the development on tribal res land?
Good question. First, we do follow the New Mexico buildings codes. International Residential Building Code is what it is right now. We do not have to apply for permits because we are on tribal trust land, and we do conduct all our own inspections. Randy Tenorio, who's my projects manager, who's up on the slideshow right now on the left corner, is a certified level 3 inspector and does all our inspections internal for us.
Okay. Next question. Do you install solar panels and air conditioning or heating units?
We do not install solar panels right now, but each one of the homes in the subdivision is equipped with an energy-efficient so-called combo unit, which provides heating and cooling. And some homes, depending on the homeowner's preference, do have fireplaces.
Okay, next question. For the one-year employment requirement, how does it work for seasonal employment that have a break in work? How is that calculated for the one-year requirement?
As long as the seasonal is within the 1 year and the income coming in is enough to support the payment for the mortgage, that's what we take into consideration. We're not wanting to have somebody and have them qualify for a house and set them up for failure. So we take it back that far to the year, and if it's seasonal, and we have a lot of unique situations here because a lot of our seasonal employee tribal members here are actually self-employed, and so we do consider that as part of their income, and that's how we handle those.
Okay. Next question. Has the state been an effective partner? If so, how?
Excuse me, did you say inspective?
Effective.
Effective. I wish I could sit here and they have not been as an effective partner as HUD and the federal side. I will say that. We have not received a lot of state funding for our project. Most of the so-called state funding that we do receive is through the New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority, and money is channeled through there for things like down payment assistance and some new construction projects. But direct state funding, no, we have not received a lot of that. What from my understanding is the tribe itself applies for direct state funding through Tribal Infrastructure Fund or ICIP funds, but we have not went down that road yet.
Okay. Next question. How were you able to make the homes affordable if there are a large number of low-income members in the tribe?
By using a tribal force account. When we can build homes under $75 a square foot, that keeps the costs down and the payments low. If you were to build the same, a 5-bedroom home that we build here at San Felipe with our force account that costs $130,000 would cost somewhere near $300,000. If you were in Albuquerque or in Santa Fe, would be even higher than that. So basically, we charge the family what it costs to build the house plus interest. And by using the force account, we've been able to keep those costs low, and families are able to afford those amounts. And again, the highest payment we have is $674.
Okay. Next question. What about coordinating a site visit to see your development and program? The slides are great, but I could see the benefits of a site visit from executive director level and board members.
Anytime. I believe my contact information is on the end of the presentation, correct? Or is it not? If it's not, I can provide that to you to send out to all the attendees.
All right.
I think your contact information is slide, I believe slide 4. Yeah. So your email's on there.
Anytime. Please feel free to contact me directly.
All right. Next question. At the beginning, what was the square foot cost using force account, and what is that now?
Good question. Believe it or not, when we first started this force account back in 2004, 2005, we were building homes at under $60 a square foot. And I'll give an example. I remember paying invoices for concrete, for a yard of concrete that was $35 a yard of concrete. Right now it's over $100 a yard. So we have went, in a short answer, I'd say about $20 per square foot is what it's increased. But even at that increase, it is still way below the area cost for square footage residential construction, which I know in our area here is anywhere from $120 to $150 a square foot. And it's not just our area. I mentioned that we've been working with some other pueblos and tribes in the area. Areas as far as a couple hours away from us are having hard times bringing in general contractors in their areas to build homes and still keep their houses affordable. And even when we go off San Felipe Reservation onto another reservation and are able to, add on additional costs because we're transporting material and we're traveling, we are still able to keep those costs about 35% lower than the area typical residential building cost. And I think that's why other pueblos have taken interest to us building for them.
Next question. What was the biggest challenge in preparing tribal families for mortgages?
I'd say patience, having patience, and specifically through the educational process of preparing families for the units. I can't overstate that because everybody wants a house and they want it right now, but everybody's not ready for a house. And getting that point across was tough sometimes. A lot of times, some of the families on our waiting list would say something like, well, we saw those families move in and we think, we will do better than that family. And we need a new house, without knowing what that prior family had been through educational-wise and pre-qualification-wise to get ready to get into that house. And so that was really a challenge. The other thing that was a challenge, believe it or not, that I did mention, and I should have in the slideshow, was it took us at least, I would say, 2 years, if not a little longer, to build the trust within the community that we were actually going to start building homes and create a home ownership program. The housing authority and the morale had been down here at San Felipe Pueblo for such a long time. As I mentioned, there hadn't been any new home construction, so-called home ownership here since 1972. And it took quite a bit of work from me and my staff to build the trust up within the community and say, this is going to happen, and we're going to try to work with you, but we need your help and participation and have patience with us to come in here, and it will work. But that was a big one.
All right. Next question. Can I get a model policy for using force account and that wage determination?
Yes, and I'm glad, absolutely, you can get that, and I'm glad you brought that up because I seem to have missed that on the slideshow, and I know it was on there, but I was trying to go faster than I should have. But one of the things we developed is we have our own tribally designated wage scale here through the force account. And the reason we went that direction because the Davis-Bacon classification chart for our county here in New Mexico literally is horrible. There are maybe 3 classifications for construction work, which is a joke to me. Our tribally designated wage scale, I believe, has 17 classifications, including apprentices and helpers. But absolutely, send me an email and I can forward that out. I can provide a copy of the tribally designated wage scale and our forced account policy, which is part of our personnel policy.
All right. Next question. Have you ever considered using low-income housing tax credits?
We have, and for various reasons, I would prefer to use Title VI and 184.
All right. At this time, I'm not showing any other questions. So I'd like to take a moment to thank our speakers and thank you all in the audience for joining us today. This call has concluded. You may now disconnect.